By most people's standards, I've always had an unusual relationship with money and financial risk. To me, it's always been a game. Some of my earliest memories include playing low-stakes gin rummy and betting the horses with my grandpa. As a teenager, I learned how to play poker and program computers. I quickly became hooked on both. I started my career in Palo Alto doing artificial intelligence research in the early 1990s. But soon after getting a glimpse of this new thing called the World Wide Web, I gave up the ivory tower and gambled on my first startup with two friends. Pick'em was a fantasy sports company, and I got really good at designing games involving competition for scarce resources. When my partners and I cashed out with $1 million each, I doubled down on my fantasy world. I invested in startups and gambled on high-flying internet stocks, even after the web bubble burst. I traveled the world for 3 straight years on the professional poker circuit, which at the time was anything but professional. It felt more like an endless, traveling summer camp with characters straight out of the movies. After 2 full years of travel, my best friend challenged me to an adventure. Let's spend the next year touring the United States in an RV, attending sporting events, and playing games. I quickly called his bluff, and thus was born the ultimate sports adventure, which is how I found myself in Charlottesville for the first time in the fall of 2003. We were coming to watch a Wahoo homecoming game and see what other fun we could have. The Beta House adopted us for the weekend and let us park the RV on their front lawn. The fraternity brothers schooled us in beer pong and other local traditions, like late-night Gus Burgers at White Spot. Making money was always easy for me. Easy come, easy go. I always knew I could make more if it ran out. So after the RV trip, instead of hoarding what was left of my original fortune, I used it to support myself and launch a new company and play some more poker. As the startup was failing and my bankroll dwindling, I entered a World Series of Poker tournament. 3 days later, I walked away a world champion with $350,000 in cash in my pocket. That win sustained me until one of my early angel investments began to pay off. In 2002, I had invested $50,000 to help launch an online poker site called Full Tilt Poker. By 2007, we were making so much money that we began distributing dividend checks to investors. I went from near broke to suddenly making $250,000 a month. I was flying in private jets, and I was partying like a rock star. And despite the egregious displays of wealth at times, I like to think I spent my money on many of the right things. I've donated and raised millions of dollars for various charities that I'm passionate about. I invested in dozens of entrepreneurs, and I've helped mentor many hundreds more. I treated my friends and family to luxuries they couldn't and wouldn't spend on themselves. But years of treating money like a game had taken a toll on my compassion and my basic motivations. As a poker player, I'm required to exploit your greed and your fear. As a venture capitalist, it's impossible not to capitalize on your inexperience and your desperation to get my money. As a game designer, I became a master of engineering incentives to get the economic behaviors I want out of you, regardless of how your behaviors will make you feel. And while I rarely use these skills in intentionally harmful ways, I became callous and unconscious to how people feel about money and how they felt about my behaviors. By the time my financial hot streak ended at the age of 43 years old, Full Tilt Poker had earned me nearly $12 million, and I was sitting on an estimated $100 million in equity. Then, in April of 2011, the United States Department of Justice issued indictments for illegal gambling and fraud. They accused Full Tilt Poker of being a global Ponzi scheme. By October, I was named personally in the lawsuit. And by January, things were looking quite bleak. My sole source of income and the vast majority of my assets were gone. Several of my very closest friends stopped speaking to me. By year end, my wife and I were fighting. And I was starting to exhibit manic and highly delusional behavior for the first time in my life. Early in the new year, I woke up in a hospital psych ward in a paranoid, psychotic state, trying to figure out the key to the game to get myself released, not realizing I'd actually signed myself in the night before, and I was free to go at any time. And while I wish I could say this experience taught me my lesson about the dehumanizing effect money has, it didn't, not right away. Playing only for myself, the stakes never felt high, not high enough to look in the mirror. I guess I was afraid to see what I might see. It was only after starting a family that I realized how every little action, every intention was being absorbed and imitated. How my own gamification of life, of human emotion, and not being radically honest with myself, all of this would lead to a recapitulation of my own traumas in my kids. So I asked for help from a community of people who, like myself, were ready for change, beginning with ourselves. As a community, we hold up the mirror for each other, not because there's any financial incentive, but because we care about each other. One of the main truths that's been hard for me to look at is the overwhelming power money has to hijack my neurology and keep me operating from fear, greed, and emotional disconnection long past the point of rational self-interest. Allow me to illustrate what I mean. Right now, there are 7.5 billion people on the planet, with nearly half of us living on less than $2.50 a day. Yet, there's an estimated $250 trillion in excess wealth being hoarded around the world. We produce enough food to feed 10 billion people, and yet malnutrition and starvation are still realities for many. In the United States and Europe, there are 7 million people without homes, while 30 million homes sit vacant. The level of suffering behind these numbers is staggering. But it's hard for me to really feel this. Can you? Can you? Now, I assume most of us here have homes and are not undernourished. By a show of hands, who has walked past a homeless person asking for yourself, for your help, yearning for human connection, and you walked right on by without even as much as eye contact? Look around. Okay. Evolutionary biology explains the disconnect clearly, how we're wired to fend for ourselves and our kin while ignoring the needs of everyone else. But emerging neuroscience is also clear on how we're hardwired for empathy, giving, and self-sacrifice. Furthermore, we're finding out just how malleable our entire neurobiology really is, well into adulthood and old age. So what if we could reprogram our brains and our behaviors to tap into this ability to feel compassion for people everywhere, regardless of how we're related? Is it possible to create money which supports and enhances our empathy and reflects the value created by helping each other because we care? I believe this is possible. But unless we pause and take an honest look in the mirror and reflect on our own personal roles in the global mess we're in, if we can't do that, we're never going to form the neural connections necessary to see and feel the path forward. Einstein said, no problem can be solved with the same level of consciousness that created it. So I'm going to hold up a mirror and reflect for you one of the ways money works to hijack our humanity. I don't know you or trust you, but you have something I want, like food. So I give you a piece of paper and you feed me. Later, you take that piece of paper, you give it back to me, so I will let you sleep in my house. This confidence game is the basis for the entire global economy. Money allows us to cooperate while keeping complete emotional distance from one another. And the more we actually do care, the more complicating and hurtful money can become. Cryptocurrency is a new form of digital money. If you've heard of Bitcoin, it's the original cryptocurrency. You might have also heard of an internet technology called the blockchain. Blockchain and cryptocurrencies, they're one and the same. Without one, the other doesn't exist. I'd initially heard about Bitcoin from a colleague I'd helped hire at Full Tilt Poker, and I was instantly hooked. I viscerally understood the appeal of money that wasn't controlled by governments or banks too big to fail, but instead money controlled by a decentralized protocol, much like the internet itself. A protocol that no one person or institution can change unilaterally, and, frankly, which is as unstoppable as the internet itself. As a game designer and computer programmer myself, I saw the genius of the Bitcoin protocol. It's a competition for scarce resources, a race to solve a cryptographic puzzle wherein the winner is rewarded in Bitcoin. Then, immediately, a new game begins with an even harder puzzle. As the game goes on, it requires exponentially more computing resources. Yet, the size of the reward diminishes over time. And here's the kicker. The Bitcoin protocol sets a hard limit of 21 million Bitcoins ever in existence. So as long as there's demand and people keep playing the game, the market price for a Bitcoin is guaranteed to rise. And when prices rise, demand increases and more people want to play the game. The CEO of JP Morgan and other financiers have called Bitcoin a fraud. And in a sense, they're right. We buy Bitcoin speculating it will go up in value, so we can sell it to someone who's speculating on just the same thing. But if enough holders of Bitcoin stop believing it has value, it will crash and become worthless. In this way, Bitcoin is fraud, just like the US dollar. Economists will argue the dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the government. But as we all know from the latest financial crisis and the $20 trillion of national debt that we have, there's not much faith or credit left. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is backed by something way more bankable: human greed and the fear of missing out on the next price increase. As the Bitcoin protocol was copied and modified, different strains of cryptocurrency have evolved with more sophisticated protocols. These protocols do add fundamental value to the currency. I love how if you hold Filecoin, for instance, you hold the right to exchange it for cloud-based file storage. Other cryptocurrencies are backed by Uber-style ride-sharing, creative content, and real estate. So if you get stuck holding these currencies when their market price crashes, at least you can redeem them for the underlying thing of value backing the currency. With cryptocurrency, I don't have to have faith because I have collateral. The promise of cryptocurrency is to create jobs and liberate us from the economic shackles of government-controlled money is both fascinating and exhilarating to me. But if we remain in denial about the neurobiology and the unconscious motivators involved, we're going to accelerate the collateral damage created by Money 1.0. We're just now learning how thoroughly social media hijacks our brain's reward systems and our fight or flight responses. And now we're adding rocket fuel to the mix. And the pace of growth in cryptos, it's actually a bit frightening. In 2011, when I first got involved, the market value of Bitcoin was about $40 million, and it was the only cryptocurrency around at the time. Now there are over 1,000 different kinds of cryptocurrency, and their value has ballooned to just under $200 billion as of today. If the current exponential growth continues for just another 6 more years, cryptocurrencies will surpass the value of all traditional money combined. Perhaps this is why JP Morgan and every major financial institution on the planet is experimenting with and investing in cryptocurrency despite their claims that it's a fraud. And perhaps this is also why citizens of countries like Zimbabwe and Venezuela are adopting Bitcoin as their currency of choice. And why the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is now talking publicly about the end of banking and the inevitable triumph of cryptocurrency. While I have my doubts about Bitcoin itself, I have no doubts that cryptocurrencies are the future of money. But like all technologies, cryptos are a reflection of the values held by their creators and their users. If you had the power to redesign money, would it be your priority to enable faster transactions, commodifying everything, and creating competition for artificially scarce resources? Or would you want your money to embody human values like social justice, health, creativity, biodiversity? We're at the dawn of programmable money. For the first time in history, we have the power to change how it works. And we don't need permission from anybody else. We can come together, those of us who care, and design currencies which serve our community needs, which reflect our values and our priorities. I have a lot of ideas. What about a cancer coin, which pays doctors and other healers for actually saving lives and for quality of life? Or a renewable energy coin, which takes sunlight and converts it into a universal basic income for everybody alive? Or how about a community-based currency for social entrepreneurs to support one another and share in each other's success? These are all possible. But these are just ideas. They don't mean a hill of beans unless they reflect the actual values and priorities of the global community. Right now, the global monetary system is being rebooted by software developers, government agents, and the wolves of Wall Street. And it's happening at a staggering speed. Do you trust them to program Money 2.0 with your values and your priorities? We all need to participate, especially those who feel disenfranchised by money, who feel the dehumanizing effects, who want tomorrow to be different than today. If we're going to survive on this planet, we need to wake up to reality. We already have enough material wealth to solve all of our economic problems overnight. Our problem is not an economic one. Our problem is we refuse to see and feel how utterly interdependent we all are on one another, not just at the local level, but globally as well. I don't know what the solution is, but I know it starts with all of us coming together to cooperate, not in a transactional way, but in a human way, not because we're paid to do so, but because we care about each other. Thank you.